welcome back to Colombian Influence. We are back with the book club series on chapter 11 today.
Yes, so chapter 11 is about adopting older children, and it is broken down into the following sections. Now, there's a lot in this one, so brace yourselves.
There is.
The first section, or all of the sections, 1 year of love, the issue of touch, fear of connection, being empathetic, difficulties in school, the teacher's responsibilities, discussing the biological family, the wounded parents, healing the adoptive parents, taking care of the biological children, a word about fathers, a chip off the old block, father's support for the mother, and adoptive parents do make a difference. So, as usual, we'll kind of go through the sections that kind of stuck out to us, talk about some quotes that we thought were important, and then just kind of sum up at the end. So, starting off, I think that you said in the beginning you had quite a bit. Oh my God, there's a lot.
I know. I don't know. I'm just like, yes. And it's interesting because, like, when I talk about the summary of the chapter, you'll see it's interesting because I didn't think I related a ton to it, but I must have, obviously.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because adopting older children shouldn't necessarily ring true to us just based on the title.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, I think there's a lot that makes sense just in general. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, so with me, I think, gosh, where do I even want to start? Just that I think the past episodes that we've talked about and kind of touched base on, I think it was just recently, chapter 9, I believe, talking about like pre and post counseling and how that is super important. It kind of just touched base on this again, and I thought that was just something that I underlined and really felt strongly about because a lot of birth moms, first of all, don't get that. Like with our birth moms, they probably don't even have those type of resources.
Yeah.
But I think that would just be so important. And with this, it just really talks about, although the issues for adoptees are the same regardless of what age they are relinquished and adopted, there are some things to consider when adopting older children. You know, attachment and separation issues are huge. The traumas place a great deal of responsibility upon the adoptive parents just for understanding, compassion, and restraint in dealing with this difficult behavior. And I just think it's very good for adoptive parents to know, regardless of the age, kind of the breakdowns this book has given, but especially for older adoptees. They have so much more awareness of the different traumas they've gone through. So I think that's really just what stuck out with me there. Obviously, I highlighted and underlined a lot, but I'm not going to go into super in-depth detail with all of it. But one last part that really just was like, I don't know how I felt about it. It just said, parents who adopt older children are often told such things as 1 year of love for each year abuse, and are led to believe that if they can just love enough, these children will be fine. Of course, they never can.
Yeah, I actually at the very end of that just highlighted, as you continued, of course, they never can because the children don't trust anyone or anything. And I highlighted, why should they?
Yes.
Like, and there's actually a lot in this chapter talking about, like, what their reactions are. Like, the next section being the issue of touch, being like, touch is really scary and traumatic. One line being, I won't hurt you, I just want to love you, are words many abusers use to seduce the child.
Yes.
So the combination of that, the why should they, I thought highlighted the next couple chapters. Like, fear of connection really stuck out to me. Did you have any others to highlight in the first couple pages?
No, you totally touched on the last two things that I think really just kind of wrapped that up. And that's exactly what I was feeling.
Yeah, with the next one being the fear of connection, issue of touch. Like, a lot of this is just like, here are the behaviors. And kind of like, why are we surprised?
Yeah.
Because it's like, there's so many things like going from like the beginning of the fear of connection, like they wish that the child will be able to trust, like just wishing that doesn't translate to trust. Going into not only are many of these children not grateful, but they're angry, suspicious, and hostile. Like, it doesn't matter that parents have no intention of abusing. They don't know that. Like, all of these things that I think that maybe why I connected with this chapter so much is like, that doesn't matter. I think, you know, as far as age. And I think a lot of it is like, why are we surprised that they feel this way?
And it literally says, the one part I underlined out of this huge page, and I know you had a lot more, was the child is simply defending himself against being hurt again. Point blank. That's super simple, but that's exactly it.
Exactly. I with this section of fear of connection,
Mm-hmm.
really what I connected with, like, is just the fact that I get questioned about my trust issues all the time.
That's interesting.
Like, it's just always like, well, just take a chance. I'm like, I'm always like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, why would I ever do that?
Mm-hmm.
And with things like this, the trust issues aren't just because, like, they don't come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, trust issues come from learning the behavior and the patterns. To us, trust issues and trust in general is based on facts, logic, following patterns, not simply faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have that.
Right.
Like, that doesn't compute in my brain at all. And I can't imagine that kind of thing coming after a pattern of abuse.
Yeah.
Or
neglect
and abandonment,
yes.
all of those kinds of things, like in foster care. Like, this all makes sense to me. Which is
agree.
Crazy.
Oh, I loved that. To trust is based on facts, logic, and following patterns, not faith.
Yep, so that's my, I guess, first thought in this entire chapter. And then just kind of, or in this section, like, kind of acknowledging the fact that these are what the kids are going through. I guess going on to that, I think, did you have some stuff for the being empathetic?
A little bit. With this, I think it's just making sure the adopted parents have the empathy with their past, with the adoptee's past, just being without being intrusive, listening without judgment, validating the feelings, and just trying to understand their helplessness and sorrow and like everything they've gone through. They're not going to fully understand, but just giving them that listening ear and allowing them to have that open and honest space is going to help them at least begin to heal. It's not going to come day and night. It's not going to maybe ever happen. It's
not
possible.
Entirely.
Yeah. To fully trust them or, feel complete, it might not ever happen, especially being older. You've already gone through all these years alone. So just be patient is the main thing I really took out of that for adoptive parents. Just be patient and be mindful of everything that you're portraying to them or telling them, and just, again, have no judgment. Just listen to the adoptee because we are the ones going through all of this.
Yeah. I think the other part of this section was just talking about how adoptees want security, they want boundaries, like they need those limits to kind of feel safe.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. Like, moving on to the next section, just being about difficulties in school and things like that, is like there's a lot of anxiety that is just based on, I guess, lack of either routine, like those kinds of things can really mess with that kind of anxiety. And like, I don't know, I think that that's really important to note as well.
Yeah, they talked about how we, as I feel like adoptees, thrive on routine and consistency. This gives us that sense of security.
Exactly.
And I totally agree to that. And then kind of with our discussion questions that we have for each chapter, I had one with this. Do other adoptees struggle with school, and or did you feel the pressure from your adopted parents kind of just measuring their own worth through your school performances?
Was that in here?
It's at the bottom of 141.
Oh, okay, I saw that you had written a page number. I was like, I don't feel like I saw that. But
and like,
oh, okay.
And I don't necessarily think I'm stupid, but like, I don't know. I did struggle in school, and I don't know if that was just, I don't know what that would stem from.
See, I know I had trouble concentrating and like focusing on it.
I would sleep in school all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was bad, and I wonder if it was just, my depression at that point or whatever it was. Like, I did not care, and like concentrating, sure, but it was just interesting. Like, I didn't get the pressure from my adoptive parents, like, oh, you need to be certain, like they were,
kind of did.
Yeah, they just, I think they did well at just kind of understanding, like, you're struggling. What can we do?
You're at, yeah.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people, even non-adopted people, have that high standard from their parents that make it even harder to concentrate or do well.
Because then you're afraid, and it totally messes with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I just wonder, do other people have that experience? And do you think it's related to being adopted or not?
I think that's really interesting. I thought that just being acknowledged here was really good, especially with it being about older adoptees.
Yes.
Like, you're suddenly coming in, like, this kid is coming into your life, going to school at probably a new place, like, all of those factors that need to be considered, and they're expected to do well in school. Like, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they had that in here. They also then talk about teachers' responsibilities and just, which I was kind of not expecting, but I'm glad that they kind of involved them.
This little part was good too. And I highlighted the simple acknowledgement of the child's feelings is good rather than criticizing their behavior, a calming and positive effect on them. If you just ask them, like, hey, it looks like you're struggling, go get a glass of water or put your head down until you can concentrate again. Instead of like, get out of the room, you're causing a distraction or something like that. Like, those two different things make the world. And I feel like my mom was a teacher, so she had that calming effect of like, okay, I get it. Just take a break for now. Instead of like, why are you awful at this? Why aren't you focusing better? You know? So I think that helped, but it was just very interesting.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the fact that those were acknowledged here. Moving on to the next section, discussing the biological family. I had quite a bit notated here. I guess just kind of taking note again, this is probably an older child. One thing I highlighted was, although it makes no sense to such a child to say that his mother really loved him when he probably remembers the abuse, neither is it right to make disparaging remarks about any child's biological parents, no matter the circumstances of the separation. I think that's a very good rule of thumb because that can cause a really complicated, like, relationship / complex, I feel like, kind of around that.
How should I feel, you know?
Yeah, because it's like, okay, my parents feel this way, or like my, you know, second parents, you know, feel this way. It's like, going on to that, it says, acknowledge his feelings without voicing their own is how it should all be. And it says, we all like to be able to complain about our families, but we don't like to hear anyone else do so. And I think we can all kind of agree with that. Like, that's totally a thing.
Absolutely. And adopting an older child often means they have memory of their biological family, parents, siblings, other relatives. So that's all very prominent in their mind. So I think that's just a good thing to keep in mind as well. Like, they do have recollection compared to us where it's like those fantasies, you know? It's completely different.
Exactly. Another thing I wanted to mention here is just talking about rules for speech and behavior when one adopts abused children. Basically allowing the child to express his anger verbally, even if this means swearing. Swearing is only words, is what this says. I'm like, I think that that's really interesting. That paragraph finishes by saying, as I said before, these children did not ask for their lives to be manipulated in this way, and they have no reason to be grateful for it. We've talked about that quite a bit, just as far as people saying like, oh, you're so blessed, you're chosen, you should be, you know, grateful, blah, blah, blah. Like, being grateful is just such a loaded, you know, BS, I feel like, at this point. And it's just like, especially if you're coming into a situation where either it's a foster to adopt or like, you know, any of those kinds of situations where you're an older kid and you grew up with these, you know, with this family, and there could have been any sorts of reasons that caused you to be put into foster care. Like, you have no reason to be grateful. Like, that's insane. So, like, let your kids swear, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at this point.
Don't shame them for it.
Exactly. It's like, it's just words. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else on that?
No. I did
not. Did you have anything on the next couple sections?
I didn't, honestly. I think I really, like, what really stuck out to me was the beginning of the book, and maybe at the very end, but nothing too much with, like, I think you had some with the healing.
You know, I thought I did. I didn't underline a whole lot, and actually more of the next chapter goes into a little bit more of, like, kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I'll go into that a little bit later in our next chapter. Although there is, I guess, for the healing of the adopted parents, one thing I noted was this section, like, I don't know, I guess all that I wrote down was like, maybe it's just because of where I'm at today, but this made me feel really guilty. Kind of just goes to show that there's a lot of healing still to do, and it kind of never stops. But it says, like, adult adoptees who are reading this book might be surprised to know that their parents need to heal too. Yeah. And it's like, a lot of it kind of is going back from how maybe an adopted child, like, address their parents when they were younger. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you were like me as a teenager, but it was like I was so reluctant to I really have, or I didn't feel like I was gonna have that relationship with my parents the way that like maybe my sister did or something like that, where it was like
Or that you see your friends having with their
exactly. That's a
mothers.
really good point, actually. Comparing yourself to like your friends and like what your friends and their mom can talk about or something,
Yeah.
like compared to like what I was like, this feels like I'm not gonna have that.
Yeah, and like I think I've said this before, it's almost felt like an aunt or like something that was just wasn't like
It was just
that deep connection of what a mother should be
mm-hmm,
or what I thought it should be. And that's completely changed now the older I've gotten, the
same.
closer I've gotten. But looking back, I think that's why maybe where you said where you are at today, kind
Mm-hmm.
of just closer to the age of when your parents got you. Just like different things like that just opened your eyes on, wow, the healing process is huge.
It's
And
forever.
yeah, and
Like,
all parts of the triad have to heal.
mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
So let's see. For the rest of this, the other thing I thought was interesting actually in the, let me see, bio. Oh, okay. The bio children section was talking about taking care of the biological children. What did I say here? The way that I felt about this section was that it feels different than having grown up together. Like I felt like this was talking about how in a older adopted child with them being raised with like a bio child, let's say there's two kids, the bio child feels more as though like the adopted child is getting the attention or is getting more of the, you know, nurture. I don't know,
privilege,
social treatment or
whatever. Yeah,
I don't know, like attention, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I guess it was more so like I didn't feel like I was needing to be the center focus necessarily. Like I feel like we were raised the same.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just kind of interesting where it was like, I wonder what that's like. First, like for the bio child, but also for the adoptee of that dynamic.
I know. And I just feel like it's similar in my experience also. But having a brother versus a sister, like boy and girl, I think it just didn't really stick out to me either.
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of like the younger sister. And
Exactly.
sometimes the younger sister already gets that protection and different privileges than a brother does because we have different needs. So I just think that's very interesting. I didn't really have too much off that either, but I think it's just, I think it would be very different to come in as an older adoptee with that one.
For sure. Let's see. The other section, did you have anything else in this area?
No, I have one at the very last section.
The only other thing I wanted to go over was A Chip Off the Old Block was talking about how children feel pressure to live up to some preconceived expectations. It says coming more from the father than the mother. I guess that's not something that I identify with. More so, I suppose, kind of connecting back to like the bio child is just like, I was not like how, like the way that my sister is similar to my parents, I had none of that.
Yeah.
So it was like that I kind of felt where it was like, okay, I'm not the same as the three of you.
That's
like
different.
Yeah, like I feel like that was something that I really connected with. And it, like one quote that I had highlighted was, adopted children are already very good at living the false self, and any attempt to mold them into the father's image of what he or she should be like will only serve to bury deeper this true self and feed the fuel of accompanying conscious or unconscious rage. And that's not exactly something that I'm like word for word like I get, but it's kind of like if you try to mold them into something that you're like wanting so deeply and it's not something that's going to happen, it's going to upset the both of you.
Yeah. And that happens so often. So often. Adopted or not, I see that all the time with people.
For sure.
And the disappointment continues to happen. Like just,
exactly.
Those expectations are something that are just almost unattainable.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with that.
Lastly, for me, I think mine was on the last section of adoptive parents do make a difference. I agree with a lot of what it's saying. I definitely do. Adoptive parents have a great responsibility and unique relationship with their adopted child or children. But one part that stuck out to me that I was just like, no, that doesn't make sense. Is they can and must help to heal the wounds of their child. And I took it as I disagree because I think the child, me, I have to do the healing. Like they can't help me heal through all these different things I'm doing. And I think like going through the reunion phase, going through coming out of the fog, they had nothing to do with that. That was something I had to do for myself, and that's something
Hmm.
that I had to cuz I don't have that like deep conversations with them like that. So it's like something I had to do. They didn't guide me to come out of the fog. They didn't guide me to do their reunion. They were there for like support, but like nothing more than that. So I just felt like I disagreed because they
Hmm.
can and must help heal the wounds.
See, I think that's interesting because although I felt very similarly, like I wasn't having these deep conversations, I wasn't getting that necessarily from
Mhm.
them. It's still, I mean, it could have even, I guess where I was at, it could have been a lot less support or a lot more support.
True.
And so, had there been different types of support, I should say different, not more or less, but like the differing types of support where maybe as a younger person, like maybe in my teen years, it would have been encouraged to find a therapist that was more specific. And like, although I saw a therapist that I think had adopted children, that doesn't really do much. Like, I feel like there needed to be more specific ways of that, or, and again, that's not necessarily for my situation specifically, but there could be ways of adoptive parents aiding that kind of healing. I mean, granted, for me, it's
True.
like I would have welcomed that kind of healing earlier in my life. I just didn't get there, and it took me a long time to get myself there to
Mhm.
like figure that out and be like, this is what we need to be working on. Like, this is why I think therapy for other things was only getting me so far, because there was still this that like
Yeah.
I wasn't addressing head on in therapy until I was 27.
Yeah.
Like, that's a long time.
And I guess that's a good point because they can do certain things, but maybe a lot of adoptive parents don't know the exact steps of what to do and what others need. And that's a really good point and really
Because
good.
they haven't gone through it. For the most
Yes.
part, they probably haven't, or, and
That's
obviously that's probably
why
only speaking for the ones that haven't,
yeah,
but
and I feel like that's why I disagreed because it's like we are the ones who go through it. We are the ones who know exactly what we need
do we
to
though?
heal. No, but like better than our adoptive parents.
See, I don't know if I 100% agree with that to every extent,
Mhm.
because I feel like who a person is, let's say me at 29, is a very different person, regardless of my adoption status, than at 15.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom there, there's a lot of life lived. And it's like, there are elements of that that can at least guide you in the right direction, being like, either some type of resource, like, and now kids that are growing up obviously have resources like us, where it's like, podcasts are so normal, going on TikTok, things like that. Like,
Mhm.
social media is so normalized where it's like, starting to send someone maybe resources. Like, friends of mine, we always exchange certain things, talking about boundaries, for instance,
Yeah.
things that, people say, hey, I think this would be really good for you to read. Granted, you're not as receptive to that probably as a teenager, but at the same time, those kinds of things could be approached differently and in a way that's like, a gentle nudge.
Mhm.
But I don't necessarily, obviously, although there are differing ways of growing up for adoptive child and adoptive parent, there still is something I think to be said as far as parents being encouraged to try a little harder, I suppose, is kind of where I
Mhm.
come from with that.
Sure. And I think that's something we can even dive deeper into and maybe
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
start doing our panels that we've talked about, our different resources page of something that we can really help focus on what adoptive parents can do to help you heal because I felt like it was a lot on our part that we had to do even though we had supportive parents.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
I think it would just be something that would benefit adoptees earlier in life. Like, I think it
Yes.
would be a really good, you know, normalizing that in your teen years, because we've talked
Mhm.
about that a million times where it's like, I was really struggling then, but I didn't know how to voice it because I didn't know how to really say anything in my teen years. You know, I had no idea what was going on. I was
Exactly.
dumb, whatever. But like now I feel like those, like, because mental health is being talked about so much now, we're at a really, really prime, time where we can help facilitate that kind of thing and say, like, these are the kinds of things we'd recommend. This is normal. I think a lot of teenagers are probably more normalized into like seeing a therapist, finding mental health resources, things like that. I think we're also just in a very different time.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
And that can change the whole dynamic on a lot of healing and different support. And even just here, it just says, gain support from people who have had or are having similar experiences. And I think that is something adoptive parents can do to help your child heal. And I guess I got that a little bit, but I just felt like, I don't know. We can go circles and circles on this, but it's just interesting how people feel they heal and if adoptive parents really do make that difference or not.
The only other things that I kind of noted on the end of this chapter was just kind of acknowledging the fact that, adoptive parents, like, it is a lot to handle and people need to be very aware of that. The challenge does seem overwhelming. And also just the last line in this chapter just says, meanwhile, society can help by having a more realistic attitude towards adoption in all its myriad aspects. And I think that that's 1,000% accurate, where it's like, is this being realistically looked at? Like, there probably should be also something more from maybe the organizations or the agencies that do the adoption. Like, why aren't they more involved later in life? Like, I feel like they should be a resource for all of the triad, which the next chapter goes more into the actual triad and things like with healing and such. So we'll go into that for the next one. But in this particular aspect, it's like they literally just, and I hate to say this phrase, but because it's such a business now, it's like they do the transaction and they're out.
Yep.
Why are they not there as parts of support later?
Agreed.
Everybody needs that. They should be the ones facilitating that. Like, if there's not a comfortable conversation with adoptive parents and their kid, maybe they'd be a good third party that's neutral.
Exactly.
Neutral-ish, I guess. I don't know if I'm.
And then they can also have these different groups because they have that community already.
We cracked the case. we
did it.
We did it.
Our job is done here.
Yep. Well, we did it. Guess we're done. This is the end. No, not really.
Oh, gosh.
We should.
Just the beginning.
Literally, though. That's what we should be doing. So,
overall, what did you feel or think on this chapter?
This chapter, I did feel pretty validated, I suppose. After reading it, it's based off of older, adopted children. I still felt like there was a lot to connect with. And I guess for some reason, one thing I wrote down after this was like, I'm trying my best. Like, that was something that I just kind of felt like. It was like, it came at me with the trust issue kind of thing. And people just always saying, you have to trust. And I was like, that's not how it works for me. But this was really validating and saying that adoptees don't trust for a reason. Yes. Also kind of just made me feel like the way to care for either foster kids or older adoptees is so up in the air and not definitive. And it's not, I don't know if there's really enough out there to really say what to do. And granted, every kid and every parent is different, but it's like, I think there needs to be more. And obviously that whole system is messed up. So it's like, there needs to be more on getting the families the need to or the help to nurture those children.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with what you just said in that. And I kind of just felt like with my notes here that I took after I read the chapter initially, it was just like, even though this chapter is very relatable, just kind of with being adopted, I also felt like I couldn't fully relate. Not only was I a baby when I was adopted, I was not an adult or an adult adoptee, even a preteen, like any of those ages that are even 6, just having some type of recollection of what was going on. But I also never had that abuse or the continued unknown moving from home to home, just in the foster care system. I just felt like what you said, those resources lack so much. And the reality of someone in foster care is still pretty hush-hush. Like, it's never really talked about in depth on how traumatic that is. And it didn't talk about this in the book, but I was just thinking about the topic of foster care, about how not everybody gets adopted.
Ugh, I know.
And being 18 and just being like, all right, you made it. Here you go. Like that is something in itself. And being in foster care, being adopted through foster care, whatever the case may be, you're just overlooked so often as an adult. It's just awful through those traumatic experiences. And I just can't even explain that. It's a whole nother chapter, a whole nother book of things that we can do, but I don't know. I just felt like that's a whole nother ball game, and I would just like to dive deeper into that and figure out what we can do and what resources we can provide to those type of adoptees as well, because we haven't had that, personal connection through foster care or anything like that. Somebody, but we haven't
I know a
gotten
couple,
in
yeah.
depth of what that's like. And I think that would just be awesome to be able to give those people those resources also and
that
be that
voice, too.
support.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that that's really well said as far as the whole chapter. As far as our discussion questions, obviously this chapter being about older children as adoptees, we can open these up to questions just about adoptees in general for our opinions, and then they can stay open-ended. But of course, if you are an adoptee that was, adopted as an older child, definitely please contribute to these. One thing that was kind of talked about with like parents and just kind of, I think the risk that the adult child, or not adult, I need to stop saying that.
I know, I kept saying that too.
Yeah,
but
older adoptee, kind of questions as far as the issue with trust with their parents is the question of their permanence. Looking back on your behavior as a child, do you think there are any moments that you had that you were questioning your parents' permanence?
I would say no. I don't think so. I'm just trying to think about. That's a good question.
And I think that would resonate more with somebody who was adopted
Yeah,
as an older
I would
kid,
think so too, but like, no, not that I can think of.
I think for me, it was like, it wasn't really necessarily their permanence, but it was like when there would be some kind of thing that I wouldn't fall into the same way maybe my sister did, where I was not living up to those expectations. I was like, then what? What's going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, am I just not living up to these expectations?
Right.
Like, what are they going to do when they figure that out when I'm not living up to that?
Interesting. No, I don't think I've ever felt that.
Yeah, I think more older kids are probably going to agree with that. And I think you went over the other question. Just did other adoptees struggle in school or feel the pressure from your adoptive parents, measuring their own worth through your school performance, which we obviously already talked about. So that's chapter 11. We're obviously in I think this is the healing section of the book. So there's obviously still a lot to break down. Chapter 12 is talking more about the triad itself. So there's a lot more to unpack, obviously. And we are finishing chapter 11 of 16. So we're almost done with the book. If you guys have any... I cannot
believe that.
I know, but we've made a lot of headway, and I think we've learned a lot along the way. So I'm excited to kind of get these last few chapters out for you guys. Obviously, if there are any questions or feedback or anything else that you guys want to have us talk about, or any books that you suggest that maybe we read in the future, or at least do an episode on where we can talk about it, please send those our way. Otherwise, I guess this kind of concludes chapter 11.
Yeah. Thank you for being our supporters and listening and watching us.
Check us out on social media.
Yes. Usually I say that part.
Follow, like, subscribe, send us reviews. Follow us on TikTok.
Yeah.
Colombian.influence,
I think so.
Yes. We do some stupid things. We do some good things. I don't know. There's a mix. So check us out. Otherwise, obviously, you can get Primal Wound. Wow, I can't speak English anymore. Primal Wound on bookshop.org. Go to our bookshop, and then we get part of those, the profits from the book. And this way we're supporting something else besides Jeff Bezos. So check us out. Until next time.
Later.
Bye.